For me, this meeting offers an opportunity for a great reunion with highly esteemed editors, whom I now call my friends. Given my frequent interface with you, even before the election of this current executive, I suspect that you may one day consider making me a fellow of the guild. I must say that I appreciate the privilege to deliver this keynote address. After reading your letter nominating me as the keynote speaker, I was at a loss as to why the conference should at this one time choose a theme: democratic governance and national cohesion, the role of editors, and a sub-theme: electoral integrity and trust deficit, what Nigerians expect in 2027. But on a closer scrutiny of the theme and the sub-theme, I came to the informed suspicion that as the wordsmith that you are, you were cleverly playing with words to downplay your public accountability to electoral integrity and trust deficit. Obviously, you accept to be held accountable for democratic governance and national cohesion. Hence, you added a rider, the role of editors, which is a clear indication of your willingness to accept public scrutiny. But you cleverly evaded that rider in the sub-theme, electoral integrity and trust deficit, what Nigerians expect in 2027. That was very, very smart of you. But I have news for you. I will not let you escape accountability for electoral integrity and trust deficit and what Nigerians expect in 2027. Here is why. If you have a role to play in democratic governance and national cohesion, then you also have a role to play in electoral integrity and trust deficit. Because without electoral integrity, there can be no democracy. Electoral integrity begets democracy, and democracy begets good governance, and good governance fast-tracks the exorcism of trust deficit. In all of this, your role as facilitator, amplifier, or catalyst is key. Your reports and comments paint a picture of tomorrow. Therefore, the picture you paint of 2027 is what Nigerians should expect. So I hold it to be true that as editors, you should be held accountable for both the theme and the sub-theme. And since you asked me to speak on the theme and the sub-theme, I have used the privilege you conferred on me to come up with a hybrid lecture topic. So for me, my keynote topic today is 2027, editors as catalyst of democracy, national cohesion, and electoral integrity. I do not doubt that you will agree with me that in the context of this conference, there can be no better description of your role as editors. As I proceed with my speech, you will find more reasons to agree with my position. To start with, let me say that editors are very powerful influencers of society because you wield the most powerful weapon on earth, and that weapon is the pen. The weighty words of the celebrated English author Edward Bulwer-Lytton in his 1939 play Cardinal Richelieu, "The pen is mightier than the sword," says it all. It was a metonymic statement. The significance is that the pen can change and shape society faster and more permanently than the sword. The pen represents intellect. The pen represents written ideas and diplomacy, while the sword represents physical violence and military might. And that powerful instrument, the pen, is your symbol of trade and work tool. As a matter of fact, it is proudly displayed on your logo. I know that as editors, you will be quick to remind me that as powerful as your pen may be, you are professionally restrained from giving impartial and objective reports of events, and that you are not participants in the events. That is one side of the coin. The other side is contained in the providential ways of Stephen Ward, a leading scholar of journalism ethics, who reminds us that journalism objectivity is both an epistemic and an ethical principle. Epistemologically, it is part of the pursuit of knowledge. Ethically, it is a moral requirement. But objectivity is not simply neutrality. It is not the mechanical transcription of events, as if such transcriptions were even possible. Every editorial choice, what story leads, which voice gets prominence, which narrative dominates, is interpretative. Objectivity, properly understood, carries a solemn responsibility. It must be calibrated by overriding consideration of national cohesion and editorial integrity. When your editorial framing treats every electoral challenge as evidence of systemic fraud, rather than contextualizing it within an imperfect but improving process, you are not being objective. You are making a choice, and that choice has consequences. So as I speak today about editorial responsibility, I am not asking you to abandon objectivity. I'm asking you to practice it at its highest level, and that is accuracy over speed, verification over virality, and context over clickbait. Does that amount to restriction? The answer is no. On the contrary, it is a call to rigor. The powers editors wield, what editors actually do is akin to a pastoral duty. You decide what becomes urgent and what disappears. You choose the lens through which millions of Nigerians see their country, see their leaders, and even see each other. That is how the media is structured. A policy shift is either government U-turn or strategic adaptation. A land border closure is either economic protectionism, impoverishing the people, or national security imperative. Same facts, different frames, entirely different public perception. The 2023 elections demonstrated this better than any example I can conjure. Editorial choices shaped how Nigerians expressed and experienced that election. Not just what they knew, but how they felt about its legitimacy. Some newsrooms framed every electoral challenge as evidence of systemic fraud. Others emphasized resilience and reform. Both could cite facts, but the editorial architecture determined whether readers saw a flawed but improving process or a collapsing democracy. When we look at the performance of the media in the 2023 elections, we find that it was actually below expectations. While some were truly professional in their reportage, some took it upon themselves to even undermine the integrity of the electoral body, under the guise of calling the election results based on returns from a few billion units. The credibility of that election was undermined. The people were lured by such reports to believe that the election was not free, was not fair, and was not credible. Unlike other professionals, editors cannot claim to be merely executing mandates. They are actively responsible for how the citizens rate the electoral process. A civil servant implements safe policy. A police officer enforces the law. But you actively choose the lens. In doing so, you shape public opinion, you shape public trust, and ultimately public behavior. That is the power you wield. The question is whether you are wielding it with the weight it deserves. So when we talk about the trust deficit and who bears responsibility, there is a trust deficit in Nigeria's information ecosystem, and it is corrosive. The 2023 Demand Trust Barometer is revealing enough. Look at the numbers. It revealed that 51% of Nigerians trust the media. That sounds neutral, perhaps even acceptable, until you realize what it actually means. It means that nearly half of Nigerians, that is 49%, actively distrust the media, not have concerns about or skeptical of distrust, as in they do not believe our media reports. And here is what should trouble you even more. According to the barometer, Nigerians trust in NGOs. 71% of Nigerians trust NGOs. Their trust in businesses is at 66%. Their trust in the media is at 51%. And their trust in the government is at the minimum of 35%. Think about what the hierarchy reveals. It means that Nigerians trust non-governmental organizations. Many of them are funded by foreign interests and operate within minimal democratic accountability. Yet, more than that percentage trust the fourth estate of the realm. They trust corporations that are seeking profit more than they trust journalists seeking truth. This is an institutional crisis. And it gets worse when asked directly. 56% of Nigerians say the government is a source of false or misleading information. Only 28% say it is trustworthy. The 2023 Demand Trust Barometer goes further. It identifies the primary drivers of societal polarization in Nigeria. And two variables stand out: distrust in government and distrust in the media. That amounts to distrust in the very institutions meant to inform and to govern. This creates a vicious circle. When government credibility collapses, media coverage of the government becomes suspect. When the media frames every electoral challenge as evidence of systemic fraud, rather than contextualizing it within an imperfect but improving process, it reinforces the very distrust that fragments society. When you, editors and gatekeepers, choose narratives that amplify division because division drives sales, you feed the polarization and make your own work even harder. Post-2023, trust fractured because the narratives around the election became tribal, fragmented, and in some cases, inflammatory. Coverage did not stop at the reporting divisions. It amplified it. Headlines displayed polarization and deepened it. I do understand the constraints you operate under. Many proprietors have political alignments. Advertisers have interest. Engagement metrics reward sensationalism. Division drives clicks. Outrage drives sales. These are real pressures, I agree. I don't dismiss them. But constraints are not excuses. Every profession operates under pressure. Doctors, medical doctors, they face resource shortages. Judges, they face political influence. Governors, we face fiscal limits. But we don't say because the constraints are real that failures should be justified. Professionalism is tested within constraints, not in their absence. So the bitter truth is that while INEC, security agencies, and political parties have been relentlessly scrutinized for their roles in electoral integrity, editors have largely escaped that examination. So you have critiqued everyone's responsibility for public trust, but you have not interrogated your own. So electoral integrity does not begin and end with ballot security or INEC transparency. It includes public confidence in the process. Public confidence lives or dies in the narratives you control. If your coverage leads citizens to believe elections are fundamentally rigged, turnouts drops, legitimacy erodes, and democracy weakens, regardless of what actually happened at the polling units. So you see the editorial choices you make contribute to the trust deficit which you report on. Now, speaking to the role of editors in shaping public opinion towards 2027, which is the main sub-theme. We are about 17 months from the next presidential election. What you do between now and then will determine not only what Nigerians know about 2027, but how they will experience it. You will have to choose whether to frame candidates as threats or alternatives. You will choose whether to emphasize differences that divide or principles that unite. You will choose whether editorial silence on certain stories suggests they don't matter, or whether relentless focus on some issues could pose existential threats in the country. These days, a leadership tussle within a political party gets reported as a sign that our democracy is failing. Why does this happen? Because when your coverage consistently treats political disagreement as an existential threat or conflict, when every policy debate becomes a battle, every electoral or party contest a crisis, every compromise a betrayal, you train citizens to see democracy as perpetually contested rather than a shared process of decision-making. Check out some of these prototype headlines. Crisis rocks Party A. Party B is dead. Poverty index. Nigeria is the worst country in the world. And etc., and etc. This type of sensational headlines, which are commonplace in our media space, fast-track the downfall of a country. We should protect our country. We should understand nationalism. We should be able to be patriotic. But I know the commercial trap. Sensationalism drives engagement. Candidate A, accused of fraud. It gets more attention than candidate X releases policy blueprint. Division sells, yes. Outrage travels faster than nuance. But editors are not mere traffickers in outrage. You have codes of practice. You have standards. The question is whether those standards are being applied to electoral coverage with the rigor you apply elsewhere. National interest must be your editorial North Star. And national interest in an election year means coverage that informs without inflaming, that holds power accountable without treating every contest as a catastrophe, that allows citizens to make choices without making them believe that the process is irredeemably broken. The electoral integrity begins with editorial integrity. So there is a need to understand what electoral integrity means in every sense. It cannot be only about ballots. It cannot be about security alone and logistics. It must include the integrity of the information Nigerians consume about those processes. If your newsroom allows misinformation, rumor, and tribalism to masquerade as journalism, electoral integrity is already compromised, even before a single vote is cast. If unverified claims about rigging circulate unchecked on your pages or platforms, you have undermined the process regardless of INEC competence. This is where I challenge what I see as an abdication. Editors often treat electoral integrity as someone else's responsibility. INEC, executive, security agencies, and civil society. But it is yours too. That is why I am happy with the lecture topic you gave to me. Arguably, you have more powers to shape it than most other actors because you shape the information environment in which citizens form opinions and reach judgments. Answer these questions in your heart, and you will get closer to the truth. Do you know as a professional, do your honest best to protect electoral integrity through the discharge of your duties based on national interest? Have commercial, political, or proprietary considerations sometimes informed your editorial choices? In 2027, will your editorial practice contribute to a credible election, or will it contribute to the perception of a flawed one? National cohesion can be facilitated if we can look at the editor's unfinished businesses. In all fairness, Nigerian editors have accomplished much that deserves recognition. Your newsrooms have produced investigative journalists who exposed corruption. You have published reports that held power accountable. Through your coverage, you have amplified marginalized voices. These contributions matter and are essential to democracy. But what is often missing is journalism that actively builds cohesion, not just reports on its absence. There is a difference between neutrality or neutrally documenting division and actively choosing narratives that remind Nigerians of shared values, shared stakes, and a shared future. You report on ethnic tension, regional disparities, and religious conflicts, as you should. But how often do your editorial choices highlight what binds us together rather than what divides us? When you choose to run northern leaders, reject southern candidates as your banner, instead of consensus forms around the economic agenda, for instance, you have made a choice about what matters. That choice shapes whether readers and listeners see politics as a tribal contest or a democratic process. So the reality heading into 2027 is that elections are won and lost, not only on policies or candidates, but on whether voters believe that the outcome will be legitimate. That belief is shaped by whether they have been hearing fragmented tribal narratives or cohesive nation-building ones. And that is an editorial choice you make every day. Let me give you a concrete example of what editorial integrity in the service of national cohesion looks like. Most recent reports indicate that Nigeria's $2.35 billion Eurobond was oversubscribed by $10.65 billion. That is 453% oversubscription. The Nigerian Stock Exchange recorded 2.7 trillion naira in transactions in the first 4 months of 2025, which is a 43% increase year on year. Foreign portfolio investment surged 162%. Sovereign Investment Authority now holds an asset worth of 4.42 trillion naira. Our GDP grew by 4.23%, the highest in a decade. These are real market outcomes. Investors do not oversubscribe bonds out of sentiments. They do so because they expect returns, and returns require stability and policy coherence. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's economic reforms are clearly generating the confidence that is producing these investment fostering results. So when you amplify the reality and the facts that President Tinubu's reform policies are yielding fruits and that a robust economic future is manifesting, you are using facts for nation building and inspiring narratives ahead of 2027 election. You are building confidence in the future. You are making Nigerians look towards 2027 with optimism and patriotism. But when you begin to follow the negative utterances of those who don't like our country, you are misinforming Nigerians. None of this requires abandoning your watchdog function. You can hold the government accountable and avoid framing every accountability story as an evidence of irredeemable dysfunction. You can report electoral irregularities and avoid suggesting that the entire system is corrupt. You can cover political competition and remind citizens that competitors will govern the same country afterwards. The question is, ahead of 2027, will you be passive chroniclers of division or active catalysts of the cohesion that democracy requires to function? In closing, Your Excellencies, distinguished editors, ladies and gentlemen, let me say this as part of my closing remarks. The administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu understands what is at stake. His presence at this conference is a huge statement of priority. When a sitting president dedicates time to a gathering of editors and communication professionals, it signals that the battle against disinformation and the project of national cohesion are treated as a matter of national importance. Besides, the president has backed the commitment with structure. The support and establishment of multiple strategic communication channels, from not only the National Orientation Agency to the weekly ministerial briefing series, reflect a systematic effort to ensure that the government does not cede the information space to speculation and rumor. There are transparency mechanisms designed to ensure that policy decisions are explained, defended, and open to scrutiny. You are not spectators in 2027. You are active participants. You are catalysts and facilitators. Whether you acknowledge it or not, the narratives you shape between now and the election will determine whether Nigerians approach 2027 with hope or cynicism, with trust or suspicion, with a sense of shared stake or through a tribal lens. I'm not asking you to become a propagandist for the state. I'm rather asking you to become custodians of information integrity, which sits well with electoral integrity. Let 2027 be the election year, where the Nigerian media became architects of a shared democratic future, where you demonstrated that journalism can be rigorous, can be engaging, can be commercially viable, and work in the service of national cohesion, where you accept that you are not only accountable for democratic governance and national cohesion, but also for electoral integrity and trust deficit. What you choose to do or not to do has enormous consequences for our dear country. And always remember this, even in the medieval age, when the clergy was the first estate, the nobility the second, and the commoners the third, the press was the fourth estate. In modern age, the legislature is the first estate, the executive is the second, and the judiciary is the third. The media is still the fourth estate. Now you can see whether ancient or modern, you are the last man standing. Therefore, as the saying goes, the goldfish has no hiding place. So just know that history is waiting to critique the role, not just of the first, nor the second and third estates, but the fourth estate as well, on how they did or failed to do in 2027 and the run-up thereto. It will help to make or mar Nigeria. The choice is ours in this room. I want to thank you for the privilege of listening to me. May God Almighty bless all of us. I wish you a successful convention. Thank you.